Yeah, I just got back from Iraq, and it's clearly important in the war on terror. I mean, in the most basic sense, that Al-Qaeda in Iraq, an Al-Qaeda affiliate, is resisting us there, and for the longest time has been one of our main enemies there, and one of the main causers of the mayhem, certainly the highest profile and most deadly of these car bombings and suicide bombings. And the great untold story is just how much progress we've made against Al-Qaeda in Iraq. It's rather extraordinary when you get everyone in our political debate superficially saying that's what they all agree on in the Iraq war, is that we need to defeat Al-Qaeda and do counterterrorism. The fact that we've made an amazing amount of progress against them, and it's almost, unremarked. That's probably an exaggeration, but certainly not being hailed the way that you would think it would be. The most significant part of it is, one, we will deny Al-Qaeda any sort of base or staging area in Iraq, but two, just ideologically, it's extremely important that you have this extremist movement getting kicked out of Iraq with the help of Sunni Arabs, who are supposed to be really the hardcore base of that movement, and they have turned on Al-Qaeda. So this will be a major defeat militarily, tactically, and I think strategically and ideologically to Al-Qaeda, if it continues in the direction it's going now on the ground in Iraq. Yeah, well, this is one of the things that guys there on the ground, top officers in Iraq, are just very worried about, and the metaphor they use over and over again is Iran can sort of turn the knob. They can turn the knob of the violence, and what the worry is, we've made this great progress at cost of blood and treasure over the last year, and it can all wash away more or less if Iran wants it to. So that's a huge problem, and morally, we have obviously justification in hitting back against Iran, and it's a prudential question about whether that'll be helpful enough militarily to our guys and justify the cost you're going to suffer diplomatically and politically here in the United States. And I'm afraid that Charles Krauthammer might be right in what he said a couple weeks ago, and obviously he's very clear-eyed about the threat that Iran represents in Iraq and the trouble they're causing in Iraq, but the somewhat fragile, bipartisan, to the extent the Democrats have managed to cut it off, support for the war might evaporate if we were going to undertake raids over the border to hit back against Iran. So we just may be limited to doing what we can within Iraq, and that's obviously an imperfect answer. On the Iranian nuclear program, I think it's correct to say, as Rudy Giuliani does repeatedly, that the diplomacy is not going to have an effect unless there's some realistic threat of force eventually at the end of the line. And what you hope is that threat is realistic enough that you never actually really have to follow through on it, because there's going to be a lot of, there's a lot of downside risk to striking Iran, because they have various means to hit back at us. But you're not. There's no chance that diplomacy is going to work unless you have that teeth behind it. Well, that's a good question, and that is one theory as a cause of Western European irresponsibility, is that for 50 years they haven't had to defend themselves. On the other hand, I just read this Walter Russell Mead book, God and Gold. Basically, is extended meditation and history of Anglo-American exceptionalism and what accounts for it. And at the end, he makes a really good point. All the EU is very annoying, and we get annoyed by Western Europe. It's a huge deal that you have those countries pacified, not competitive militarily, almost kind of in a post-historical, if you will, phase. That's an enormous accomplishment of Anglo-America, and I'm not sure how much you want to reverse that. And to the extent you do, you certainly want that to be happening, within the umbrella of NATO. So I mean, you certainly wouldn't want them to have a sense they're being, cut loose in any sense. because you don't want, it's a huge strategic advantage to us that you really want Germany outside of NATO deciding it's a really dangerous neighborhood and having to rearm. No, we had a long experience with that, and it didn't work out well. So we don't want to go there. Is Ron Paul insane? No. No, I think he's, obviously fulsomely wrong about a lot of things, and in some ways represents the fallacy of taking any good idea to its logical conclusion and beyond. I'm a limited government conservative myself, and in some ways you can say Ron Paul is a much more consistent limited government conservative than I am, but that is why he's so out of touch and so impractical. And certainly the way he tries to apply his libertarianism to foreign policy issues has been a pretty big bust in the Republican primaries. We're in some respects lucky because we were a fortnightly magazine, and as the news cycle sped up, it's just harder and harder for fortnightly to keep up with things. So we were really forced to go onto the web in a big and intensive way sooner than other publications. And a lot of people historically at National Media said, why don't we become a weekly? And there seemed to be a lot of merit to that. Now I think it's ended up working out pretty well for us because the web is just so immediate. You can keep up with the hour-to-hour debate, media and political debate, but then you have a print publication that can take a step back and doesn't try to be as timely as a weekly naturally has to be. And I would think for commentary purposes, you guys are in almost an ideal situation in that regard, having a website now that's very much in the mix of the daily debate, but a monthly publication that's always been about taking a step back and a more Olympian view of the issues facing us.